Hello and welcome back to this first session in Semester 2 in the Level 6 module Evaluating Mentoring in the Support of Children and Young People. Today we're going to be looking at ethics and values, and the lecture is based on the 6 materials available in the pack, which is available as a PDF download, but I'll also bring paper copies with me to the next session. So as usual, the pack begins with quite straightforward material at Article 1, which is the MacDonald article, and then moves towards more complex material as we move through the pack. And this is intended so that your knowledge is built upon incrementally. So first of all, you'll notice the picture on the front of the pack, which is a picture of some Blackpool rock, which I've quite clumsily stuck the label values over the top of. And this is a metaphor I like to use quite often, in that values and ethics should be concerns that run through our entire practice, like the letters of Blackpool Rock. Also, I come from a position as a practitioner that if we understand the ethical base of a particular course of action or why we do things, we might not necessarily have to get bogged down in too much of the detail regarding the policy in which we work. Therefore, if we can understand the values and principles on which a policy is based, we'll more or less be sure that our practice fits within the ambit of that policy. So it's better for us to understand and appreciate principles and values of practice rather than get too bogged down in the minutiae of detail, because that minutiae of detail is generated on an hourly, weekly, monthly basis, and it's far too difficult for us to keep up. So basically, if we keep our values in check and in place, our practice should be competent and not get us into too much trouble. And so you'll see the quotation on the front of today's pack by William Inge on the aim of education is the knowledge not of facts, but of values. Therefore, in your university education business, are we really talking about the inculcation of a certain set of values rather than the simplistic memorisation of facts? Maybe that's something to go along and ponder. Okay, so what's today's pack about? First of all, we have the MacDonald article, which introduces you to the concept of a moral guide to decision making. And this introduces the idea that we don't simply study values and ethics for their own sake, although philosophers tend to. In our case, we try to apply principles and values. We try to apply principles and values to decision making. What sort of things should we apply? Well, MacDonald writes a quite straightforward and accessible guide of the kind of things you must consider, or should consider rather, when you're making ethically based decisions. Secondly, I've included some excerpts from the Children's Workforce Development Council, now defunct, guidance on learning mentor training. And the CWDC were quite clear that at the beginning of their training, students ought to study principles and values. This is an idea that practitioners should have principles and values as a base, a bedrock if you like, which then all other skills are built upon. And this is what I'm hoping to do with the class this semester. Therefore, we'll constantly be returning back to values and applying values in ethical decisions to some of the other more esoteric skills that we study. Then we move into an academic article that you might be able to include some citations from within the assignment, which I'll cover in a separate video, of Brennan and Wildflower, that look at ethics in coaching. Now, I've included this out of a manual that's a textbook that's based on coaching skills, because I'm not, as you know, I'm not willing to separate the skill base of mentoring too far away from coaching, although you'll be aware that other authors frequently do see the coaching skills subset as markedly different from the mentoring subset. And then other authors say that coaching and mentoring are similar, and then some authors will say that it's a semantic difference really that we're arguing about, and coaching and mentoring skills are essentially the same. It's up to you where you fall down on that, or which particular belief system you subscribe to, but what I would say is there's a lot to be learned from the coaching textbooks and materials in there that we can apply to this course, although it's called mentoring. Okay, then we get into some quite complex academic articles in Articles 4, 5 and 6, in that I've provided you with a source on ethics and applied ethics from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which looks at the different branches of ethics and different terms within the study, the academic study of ethics. But most importantly, I've introduced this formalised term of applied ethics. And you remember way back in the video when I was discussing the simplistic, or rather more simplistic MacDonald article, who considers that we should have a moral base to our ethical decision making. That's applied ethics. Although MacDonald doesn't call it such, it's applied ethics. What we're doing as mentors is we are practicing applied ethics. We're not just studying the discipline of ethics for its own sake, we're hoping to be able to see how ethics can be demonstrated or should be demonstrated in practice. Therefore they are applied, not merely studied in a vacuum. So you can read that to understand the concept of ethics and applied ethics in more detail. Then I move on to a very accessible text. As you know, I like Thompson's work from his book People Skills, or People Problems rather, this one, and it's the problem-solving process, at which Thompson uses Adair's 1985 model of decision-making and explains what that is. Basically, in any decision that we make, we have a series of options or choices to make. And in making choices, we have to consider ethics. What is right or wrong? What should we do in this particular decision? And we're faced with choices. A favourable, less favourable, and so on and so on. And you can read that excerpt from Thompson's chapter. I haven't included the whole chapter, just an excerpt of it, for you to understand that ethical decision making and applied ethics involve a series of choices. And consider Adair rather. And you might then include Adair's decision making process and reference to Thompson in the assignment. Finally, I've included O'Sullivan's article on thought and emotion in decision making. Now, there would be a tendency to assume that when we make a decision, an ethical decision or otherwise, we make it on pure thought alone. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, that much of our decision-making processes, both on a personal level, socially, with friends and so on, but also in an academic sense and also in a practice sense, are highly influenced by our feelings, how we feel about something. And we can't simply ignore those feelings and put them in a box and simply concentrate on thought processes, because I don't think that's humanistically how human beings function, both in terms of their social behaviour or in terms of practice. Therefore, if we can't simply put them in a box, I think what it's prudent for practitioners to do is to be aware of all times of their feelings towards a situation or a person, and how those feelings might impact on their own decision-making processes. I'm not necessarily saying that feelings negative in a negative manner. They can also impact in a positive manner, but more than anything, I think we need to be aware of our feelings when we make decisions, and also in the realm of making ethical decisions. Because we wouldn't want to, for example, make a decision on gut feeling alone. Ultimately, are we able to justify our decisions according to ethical considerations? And how do we make decisions according to ethical considerations? As we'll see in the next video, there are different ways of understanding ethics, and in that video I'll talk you through principle-based approaches to ethical decision making and also utilitarian models of decision making, and how we can see the differences in different approaches, but also some overlap, and also the fact that there's not necessarily a satisfactory conclusion by adopting either model of decision making. Okay, I hope you found that useful. Dip in and out of the pack and take from it what you will. Hopefully you'll be able to integrate that into the assignment, which will be outlined in another video. I'll see you next time.